Some of the straightforward crimes or disappearances we hear about can take a strange turn. These open and shut cases may unravel, revealing a world of sinister plots. Number 10. 18-year-old Jerry Hillard and his high school sweetheart and fiancée, 19-year-old Marilyn Green, went to the public pool in the vicinity of Chicago's Washington Park on a scorching hot August evening. It was at this time that loud bangs ricocheted across the park. It was 1982, and what started out as a typical day would turn these two young adults into victims of a double homicide. In 2015, a feature film was released that depicted the case of Marilyn and Jerry, the investigation, and the convictions. An investigation ensued, but no physical evidence had come about. But 17 hours of coercive interrogation led the detectives to the man behind the crime, Anthony Porter. This came after an alleged witness, William Taylor, claimed to have seen the neighborhood regular at the scene and even stated that he watched him commit the homicides. Following a trial, Porter would be convicted and sentenced in 1983, which not only included 17 years, but also an addition to the list of inmates that were due for execution. For 17 years, no one questioned the incarceration or the evidence surrounding the accused, until a stay was granted in 1998, just 48 hours before he was to meet the chair. The hold was placed following the concerns of the Illinois Supreme Court, which was worried that Porter was not mentally competent due to his IQ level. They explained that sending him to the chair would be deemed inhumane due to this information. A hearing was then ordered on his mental capacity, giving journalism students at Northwestern University a chance to investigate the case. They discovered that Taylor, the alleged witness, was in the swimming pool when the event had taken place, and would not have been able to see it happen, ruling him out as a witness and placing the entire case back on trial. In an unexpected twist, the students were able to figure out who the real criminal was, and it wasn't Anthony Porter. It was another individual named Austery Simon. This discovery came when Pal Ciolino managed to video record Simon confessing to the homicides, and Porter was released and acquitted, but the damage had already been done. Ciolino was a private detective who'd been aiding the very students who freed an innocent man. During the rehashing of the case, the witness recanted the testimony and subsequently signed an affidavit in which he confirmed that the Chicago police had harassed and even threatened him into naming Porter as the criminal that they were looking for. Following the confession, Simon accepted a plea bargain and began to serve his 37-year sentence after an emotional apology to the families of Jerry and Marilyn. The then governor, George Ryan, was so disturbed by how close the state had come to taking the life of an innocent individual and set forth the motions that would result in the abolishment of capital punishment in Illinois, which came in 2011. In 2003, just 3 days before his term in office was due to end, Ryan issued pardons to 4 other prisoners who were set to meet the chair, concluding that they were each innocent. Even though the actual crime was found, there was no sigh of relief for Porter. He was just 27 years old when he heard that his name was being connected to a double homicide case, making him between the ages of 43 and 44 when he was released. When he'd made his way to the police station that year with protests of innocence, he was still beaten, arrested, and convicted. During the trial, his lawyer fell asleep, and following his release, the attorneys who aided in freeing him failed to connect him with any housing security. No one helped him find stable housing, despite turning to him for assistance in freeing other wrongfully convicted inmates. Number 9. Laura Lynn Palmer was born in 1947 and later became a retired nurse who previously worked at a local hospital in California. 2018 marked her and her husband's 20-year-long life together. It would also be the year that the 71-year-old strangely vanished. On the 20th of April, around 4:30 p.m., she returned from volunteering at the thrift store near her home on Castle Fall River Road in Fall River Mills. Lynn greeted her husband and grabbed a drink from the fridge. The couple had been caring for their stepdaughter's dog, Lucy, a gray, white, and black Australian cattle dog. After grabbing a drink, she opted to take the hound on a walk in the woods near their house, and was expected to return just 15 minutes later, according to the routine. But Lynn never came back, and after 2 hours, her husband contacted the Shasta County Sheriff's Department and filed a missing person report. The investigation revealed that all her belongings had been left behind, aside from her thick eyeglasses and light beer. Soon, an extensive search was carried out with the help of volunteers, search dogs, and a highway patrol helicopter, but no sign of the missing woman was found, or the dog. 4 days later, Lucy unexpectedly returned. She drank water but refused any food offered. This suggested that she was being fed while missing. Tracking dogs had been used in the search efforts, and they'd yet to pick up on Lynn or Lucy's scent. This made the dog's return even more odd. Later, though, one of the tracking dogs would suddenly pick up on something and lead the teen on the main walking route before stopping at an abandoned trailer. The hound then headed back onto a dirt road leading to Fall River or Castle Road before the scent vanished. Lynn was said to be exhibiting early signs of dementia at the time, but possibly too early for her to forget where her home was. But authorities didn't find any evidence of foul play. A month later, though, the investigators would reveal that she'd been missing under suspicious circumstances. Lynn's son, David Crotwell, explained that everyone within a 20-mile radius of the area knows Lynn, making her case a particularly odd one. 5 months passed with no sign of her, and then 6 years dragged on. The woman was gone. This cold case is strange since most of the surrounding residents knew who she was. The dog returned fed, healthy, and uninjured, but Lynn's whereabouts remained a mystery. It's also not been established whether or not more investigation had gone into the abandoned trailer. While foul play is not suspected here, the disappearance certainly raises alarms. Some believe that the woman could have been kidnapped, and whoever was responsible may still have her. The Secret Witness Program of Shasta County, along with the family, is offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to the missing woman's whereabouts. She's said to be 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighs around 140 pounds. If you have any information regarding the missing woman, you're encouraged to contact the Shasta County Sheriff's Office at 530-245-6540. Number 8. In 2014, on the 11th of November, the Valdosta Police Department unit and the Lowndes County EMS headed to the Crestwood Nursing Home located at 415 Pendleton Place, Valdosta, Georgia. They'd received a distressed call after one of the patients was found not breathing in her assigned room. They arrived there at around 7 that morning and found 57-year-old Cynthia Weekly. She was deceased by the time the authorities got there. Nursing home passings are not something out of the ordinary, except for this one. The VPD detectives and other personnel at the scene found no evidence of any significant injuries, but requested that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation carry out an autopsy. During the investigation, the detectives learned that Cynthia had shared a room with another patient, 66-year-old Janet Clements. According to the staff, there'd been an argument between the two the previous evening, and they believed that she could have caused injury to her roommate. When Clements was interviewed, she repeated the same allegation that the nursing staff had, but her descriptions seemed inconsistent with what would later be determined by the autopsy. Following the interview, the suspect would be placed under the care of a physician at a facility. The nursing home later released a statement explaining that they were aware of the situation and that the safety of all patients was their top priority. They said that the patient allegedly involved in the incident had been transferred and they're working in full cooperation with the authorities. And so the autopsy was carried out, and it was determined that Cynthia passed away from suffocation, but it was no accident. Through thorough investigation, an arrest warrant would be signed for the victim's very own roommate, and the elderly lady would find herself at the Lowndes County Jail, where she awaited the judicial proceedings. Clements was then charged with felony homicide and aggravated assault. The ordeal would later become known as the nursing home homicide, with the victim being struck down by her own roommate. Number 7. Elizabeth Hernandez was born in January of 1988 and later became a mother of 2. Little did she know she would end up on the missing persons database. It was on the 15th of November in 2017 when the 4-month pregnant woman had spent most of the day in Albuquerque, New Mexico, visiting her sister. Later that evening, her boyfriend, Miguel Martinez, would come to pick her up. Jennifer Brooks, Elizabeth's mother, had been looking forward to some family time as Thanksgiving was on its way. Little did she know that her daughter would never make it there and would never be seen again. Miguel was the last person to see her the following day after dropping her off at the Department of Human Services, located at 3280 Bridge Boulevard Southwest. It was here that she was supposed to attend her appointment for food stamps, but according to the department's files, she never signed in. Later that day, she was supposed to head over to her sister's house again to babysit while she was at work, but she never showed up there either. An investigation ensued, and Detective Dan Torgrimson from the Albuquerque Police Department revealed that Miguel was ruled out as a suspect after his phone was tracked, corroborating his statement. He also explained that she never phoned him and later went out to look for her, but she wasn't there. But some believe that the father of Elizabeth's unborn child may have had more to do with the disappearance, but no evidence paints him as a possible suspect. Jennifer explained that her daughter wouldn't leave her children behind. She was depending on those food stamps and was on Medicaid to have the baby. But the account was not used that day and has not been used since. The entire case makes very little sense. The investigation that went into Elizabeth's disappearance deemed that foul play may have been involved, yet no evidence as to who was involved or where she ended up has since come about. The odd thing about this case is that there are many distinguishing features about the missing woman, yet she remains missing. She's said to have a tattoo of stars on her right leg, and at the time she went missing, she wore black yoga pants with gold buttons. Elizabeth has unmistakable green eyes and brown hair. As mentioned, she was also pregnant, and her due date was set for April of 2018. But no hospitals have found any record of a woman matching that description. According to her family, she left everything behind, including her clothes, makeup, and electronic banking card, which she wouldn't be able to do anything without. Something didn't add up. Despite so many distinguishable characteristics, the case remains suspiciously unsolved. Detective Torgrimson explained that no one has been arrested, and there's currently no official suspect named in the case. But the last person to have seen her is said to be a person of interest. Without evidence, though, the investigation cannot move forward, leaving the entire case frozen in its tracks. According to the detective, just one tip could solve the disappearance and change the course of the investigation. The agency involved in this case is the Albuquerque Police Department, and they can be reached at 505-924-6095. Number 6. The year was 1995 in Massachusetts when Donna Graybeal found herself in a terrifying predicament. She'd been subjected to a particularly tenacious harasser who'd chosen to target her. For 6 months, this individual would phone her non-stop. The landline rang every 90 minutes, and there was no voice if she picked up the phone to answer it. Just the creepy sound of rushing air, followed by a click and a dial tone. The harassment was frighteningly impressive, summing up about 2,600 calls in total. He even appeared to have a horde of bots at his very disposal. Whoever it was, Donna wished that they would rather bombard her with obscenities. That way she would know that she was dealing with the regular old stalker type, and not some maniac from the film franchise Scream. It took the woman 6 whole months before she'd finally had enough. She took the case to the authorities, who helped her investigate the case and figure out what sort of creep was behind it all. She said it drives you absolutely out of your mind, stating that the silence was driving her mad. The local police headed over and managed to trace the calls to Potomac, Maryland. The case was pretty much closed, and they were led to the home of Theodore and Elizabeth James. But the couple denied that they'd been the ones making the harassing calls. The prankster was the most unlikely of beings. It was an old, unused heating oil tank located in the basement of their home. The revelation brought a sense of relief, knowing that the source of her torment had been identified. Years ago, heaters such as this one were being equipped with a device that dialed the oil company whenever fuel was running low. Phone numbers are often passed on and migrated through the years, and Donna's number was the one connected to the defunct apparatus. The device randomly activated all by itself one day and went completely unnoticed, except for Donna, who was scared out of her wits. While the harasser was found, the ordeal didn't stop being incredibly chilling, because no one quite understood how this old machine had woken from its slumber. The best explanation that the investigators could come up with was something resurrected it, and it's just one of those things that makes you scratch your head. According to the Federal Trade Commission, who writes the rules that are geared towards telemarketers' use of phone dialing equipment, there's never been a report of such an issue taking place. According to account manager Stephen Crowley, Stewart Petroleum installed the redialer 8 years prior to the incident in a few homes that were participating in a short test. The oil tank was dialing an 800 number that was dropped when the company sold its division. and Donna just happened to end up with the 800 line for the food equipment repair service that she was running from her house. According to the Bell Atlantic cable maintenance supervisor, he believes the tank may have been sparked back into existence following a power surge or maybe a lightning strike. The case even made newspaper headlines, such as the Washington Post's mysterious phone calls traced to old furnace. For 6 months and 2,600 phone calls, Donna found herself in an incredibly stressful situation, and it was all thanks to an unlikely culprit. Number 5. Matthew Joseph Grant was born in 2001 in Detroit, Michigan, but grew up in Onaway, where he attended the local high school. He also became a member of the Quiz Bowl team and was the school's National Honor Society president. Later, he moved to Henrietta, New York, where he attended Rochester Institute of Technology and majored in mechanical engineering. He enjoyed hiking and fishing. But on the 20th of November, 2023, Matthew and his family's lives were about to take a turn. The 22-year-old had made contact with his father, explaining that he just had his wallet stolen by some thieves and his bank account was cleaned out. According to his father, he sounded frustrated but not entirely devastated. Later that day, Matthew went to wrestling practice and everything was going as expected. But around 10 p.m. that evening, he left his home near the campus and told his roommates that he was heading out to meet up with a girl. Later, the girl would inform them that they didn't actually have any plans, and instead the man had headed east out of the Rochester area. He was driving his charcoal gray Jeep Cherokee, which had a Michigan license plate. Matthew had disappeared, and a missing person report was filed. An investigation began, tracing the vehicle to exit 36, just outside of Syracuse. Investigators discovered that he'd been spotted just before midnight on surveillance video that day. He was at a gas station near Waterloo and appeared to be alone. 1 hour later, his E-ZPass placed him in the Watertown-Binghamton area. His cell phone had also been left behind, and his search history revealed maps of the Adirondack Mountains and the Appalachian Trails. He'd spoken of venturing outside of Rochester to explore the outdoors, but something seemed off since he'd lied to his roommates about where he was going. Missing person posters circulated the area, describing the missing man as having brown hair and eyes. They detailed that he was wearing a green jacket and blue jeans. The family and investigators asked that if anybody had any information on the man's whereabouts, they were to contact the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. Based on his activity, finding Matthew would have either never happened or would have been a heartbreaking ordeal. Yet, in an unexpected twist, he was located safe and sound. It came nearly a month later, on the 12th of December, when a police officer had discovered a vehicle, and when he called it in, he found out that it belonged to Matthew. He was found near an Appalachian trailhead. It stated that the officer took action. He was located in Palmerton, Pennsylvania, but information as to how he disappeared has yet to be publicized. But his father, Mark, released a statement explaining that he received a call from his son at the Palmerton Police Department, saying he needed help but didn't clarify what kind of help it was. The former missing individual also released a statement thanking everyone for the help in their search efforts and feeling grateful toward each of them. Yet the circumstances surrounding his disappearance remain suspicious, especially following the theft that had taken place shortly before he vanished. Based on the location where his vehicle was found and the search history, it was assumed that Matthew headed out to clear his head and explore the outdoors, but instead he disappeared for 3 weeks enigmatically. Too often, cases involving mountainous trails and hiking scenarios don't take the best path and are left unsolved, making their way onto the list of missing 411 cases. Luckily, the odds were in this man's favor, and he managed to re-emerge back into society. Number 4. Royal Scoop Daniel III was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and would later have 8 children, graduate from Yale University, and obtain a law degree from the University of Virginia. He practiced with a few firms in Washington, D.C., before he founded the Daniel Law Firm with a partner in 1990. While in Washington, he often traveled to Brazil for business, specializing in international Brazilian commerce. In 1994, Daniel had a divorce and moved to Breckenridge, Colorado, where he would become a real estate attorney and an active community member. He was also a Father Dyer United Methodist Church member, serving on the worship committee. On the 26th of April in 2007, Daniel would head to a fundraiser event, socialize with guests, and appear to be acting as usual. The following morning, though, a coworker arrived at the firm located at 130 Skill Hill Road. Here, he found a pot of coffee that was busy brewing, and strangely, Daniel's dog had been left in the office. He didn't think much of it, and the attorney was likely around there somewhere. But then he found a pair of broken sunglasses. This discovery, coupled with Daniel's absence, sent a wave of concern through the rest of the coworkers. A missing person report was soon filed with the Breckenridge Police Department, and then at 7:48 that evening, a call had been made from Daniel's phone. It was a 911 call, but it only lasted 9 seconds. When the Summit County dispatcher answered the call, there was no one on the other side. The location pinged to a tower near the firm. Police officers began their investigation but found no evidence of foul play. But his Kawasaki motorcycle and passport were gone. When the authorities had a look at the surveillance cameras at the Ski Hill Road building, they saw Daniel arriving at the office at 5:35, but it didn't capture his departure. His car was also left in the parking lot. The investigation appeared to have met a wall, with no further evidence leading to his whereabouts. The case, though, was about to take a turn when a warrant for Daniel's arrest was filed just a few days after he disappeared. The warrant was for suspicion of Class 3 felony theft. The authorities had found that the attorney had embezzled over $900,000 from clients, money that was intended for real estate transactions. The missing persons case unpredictably turned into a manhunt. At the time that he'd gone missing, Daniel was in debt and had been using the money he stole to cover some expenses, and by the 25th of May, he was suspended from practicing law. With no new leads for 4 years, the case went cold until there was a sudden break in the case. On the 7th of December in 2011, the missing criminal had been found alive. He would have gotten away with it if it weren't for a risky mistake. When crossing back into California from Mexico, Daniel used his real passport, which triggered the warrant that was out in his name. He was arrested by Border Control agents and held in the San Diego Central Jail. The 66-year-old explained that he'd been living in Acapulco and was freelancing for websites for those 4 years that he disappeared. Subsequently, the former lawyer was sentenced to 12 years of incarceration. During his trial, he told the judge that he didn't think of himself as a thief and didn't know how to show his remorse. He spoke for an hour, detailing his life in Mexico, and believed that he should return to right his wrongs. It seemed as though the criminal attempted to fake his own disappearance and even called the police, saying nothing to corroborate the story. The missing person case turned into a criminal pursuit, uncovering the tricks behind this vanishing act. Number 3. Finding herself at the center of a 2022 crime drama television miniseries called The Thing About Pam was Betsy Faria, a 2011 homicide victim. On the 27th of December, around 5 p.m., Russ Faria left his home in Troy, Missouri, and headed to St. Louis to a friend's home. He left the area at 9 p.m. and embarked on the half-hour drive back home. He stopped at Arby's for a quick dinner, arriving home at 9:40. He certainly didn't expect to come home to find his wife, Betsy, lying on the floor in front of the couch with a sharpened blade protruding from her body. The scene was horrifying. In a panic, the distraught husband dialed 911, which would only make him feel even worse. Russ would be faced with extensive interrogation, protesting his innocence but to no avail. Despite a solid alibi, the husband would be charged with his wife's homicide. The evidence, a pair of slippers appeared to have been dipped in the vital fluid belonging to Betsy. A cousin of the family hired a defense lawyer named Joel Schwartz to represent Russ, who would be looking at life plus 30 years without parole. Schwartz also received a tip stating that he should look into another possible candidate, and he did, believing his client was completely innocent. He was advised to look into one individual in particular, Pam Hupp, a mother of 2 and a longtime friend of Betsy's. But the authorities, for some reason, trusted Hupp, and so Schwartz was barred from introducing her as a likely suspect. The judge ruled that none of the prior issues involving the woman tied her to this particular incident. As the rehashed investigation pressed on, the 4 friends that Russ had been with that fateful evening testified about his whereabouts, along with surveillance footage from the stops he made on his journey home. A receipt from Arby's also came to his defense. All of this evidence, though, was not enough to convince the jury of the man's innocence, and he was sentenced in 2013. 2 years later, a new trial was granted after the defense lawyer had filed an appeal. Following this trial, the husband would be set free after being found not guilty. During the trial, though, Hupp was called in as a prosecution witness, after which Schwartz began to receive anonymous phone calls that alerted him to discrepancies in Hupp's testimony. In an interview, the woman alleged that her mother had passed away from Alzheimer's, but the lawyer discovered that the passing seemed a lot more suspicious. After doing some more digging, he found that Hupp's mother's life insurance beneficiary was her daughter. In an incredibly cliché plot twist, Hupp had also been named the beneficiary of the victim's life insurance policy, just 4 days prior to the fatal event. When the defense lawyer brought this to attention, it was blatantly ignored, even after he indicated that she would likely strike again if she were not persecuted. And she did. In 2016, 911 received a distressed call from the new suspect, claiming she'd taken the life of an alleged intruder who entered her home. The man was Louis Gumpenberger, who had a note in his pocket instructing him to kidnap the woman and make her turn over Russ's life insurance money. But further investigation found that Hupp had staged the entire thing. The note was in her handwriting, and the cash in the man's pocket had come from her dresser. She made it seem as though Russ hired a hitman to further persecute him in his wife's homicide case. But it was a failure, and Schwartz was onto her. Subsequently, the woman was charged with the homicide of Louis Grumpenberger and was put behind bars. While she'd pleaded not guilty in the case of Betsy's passing, the case was reopened, and in 2021, she was charged in first degree of the fatal attack that she acted out upon someone who trusted her. The case of Betsy Faria is incredibly chilling. Her life was taken from her by someone she trusted enough to make her life insurance beneficiary. Russ found himself in the headlights of the case, but it was really his wife's own friend who had turned on her. Russ later went on to remarry a woman named Carol, and in another twist, she'd also been the target of one of the suspect's plans to frame the husband. Number 2. Omar Bin Omran disappeared in 1998 when he was in his later teenage years. Omar came from the northern region of Algeria. He'd been on his way to a training center that was located nearby. The family believed that he was among the 200,000 fatalities during the Algerian Civil War that ran from 1992 to 2002. In 2007, there was still no sign of the man. His mother, who never lost hope, passed away, never knowing the fate of her beloved son. Her last wish was for the authorities to find him. Over 20 years later, there was still no sign of him. But then, in an unusual twist of fate, the truth echoed off the walls of the neighborhood, a lot closer to home than anyone would believe. By this time, hope had long faded when the sister of an immediate neighbor hinted at the man's whereabouts. It was alleged that she'd been going through an inheritance dispute with her brother, leading to the odd social media post. It didn't take long for authorities to obtain a search warrant, and the neighbor's house was raided. Just 200 meters away from Omar's family's property, there lived a shepherd, the woman's brother. Upon the search, officers were drawn to the stable area where the sheep were kept. In this stable was a cellar trapdoor that had been covered with hay. Inside that cellar was 45-year-old Omar Bin Omran, aged, bearded, and in good condition. When the man was kidnapped, his loyal dog waited outside the building for 2 weeks, but some sources indicate that it had been a month before allegedly having his life taken by the assailant. This remains unconfirmed, and in some sources the dog merely vanished. The victim hadn't seen sunlight in 26 years. His psychological state was pure shock, and he's undergoing extensive therapeutic and psychological care. Omar explained that he'd often seen his family from the cellar, but was incapable of screaming for help. According to him, the captor placed a spell on him to prevent him from calling out or even making a noise. Video footage from the unexpected rescue has also since done the rounds on social media, and it shows the victim shivering with a blank stare on his face as he's found in the cellar. The homeowner, a 61-year-old man, was arrested and allegedly tried to flee the scene, but authorities managed to restrain him. In the comment section of a Reddit post that covered this case, one commenter asked why the kidnapper would keep the man alive for so many years. What did he want from him? While the answer to this remains unconfirmed, some believe that it was due to superstitious beliefs. The captor believed that Omar was a Zuri. The word can be found in North African folklore and refers to a human-jinn hybrid. Zuris are said to possess supernatural abilities, and their vital fluid is sought after for magical rituals. They're also said to aid in hunting for valuable treasure, or keeping the person hidden from harm who was able to trap them. No one would have expected to find a missing person who had disappeared so many years ago, and they definitely didn't think they would find him so close to his own home, in the cellar of a shepherd. Number 1. 36-year-old Joshua Oliver Sutter was living with Ricardo Medina Jr., the other 36-year-old who played the Red Lion Wild Force Ranger on the series Power Rangers Wild Force back in 2002, and had voiced the character Decker on Power Rangers Samurai. Another accompanying party was Medina's girlfriend. It was the 31st of January 2015 when Joshua was fatally jabbed with a sharp object. It was no armed burglary or a jealous lover that took the man's life with some random weapon. The sharpened blade was the very samurai sword that Medina kept near the bedroom door, and who better to wield it than the Power Ranger himself? According to the children's television series actor, the two had gotten into an argument about the way Medina's girlfriend had parked her vehicle. According to him, this disagreement swelled to crescendos, becoming a physical fight. The official report stated that Joshua had followed the man to his bedroom and tried to force the door open, which led Medina to grab the sword and plunge it into his roommate's abdomen. But other sources indicate that the victim had been pierced multiple times, with one stating it was a total of 10 times. The Power Ranger then called 911 and stayed at the house, where he was later interviewed and subsequently booked into the county jail. But the district attorney's office decided against filing charges at this time. On the 3rd of February, prosecutors made the decision to hold off on the conviction of the fatal attack that Medina had carried out. They asked the detectives to investigate the ordeal further before they would make a decision, and the man was released that very same day. If convicted, the actor would face a life sentence. When Medina was first interviewed, he claimed to have acted in self-defense. Alan Bell was representing the criminal and insisted that his client was not guilty. The final decision on the conviction would only come almost a year after the event. In January of 2016, Medina was finally charged with homicide, with the star witness being his girlfriend. In a preliminary hearing, she stated she couldn't remember much about that evening, but alleged that she didn't think using the samurai sword would lead to such severity and injuries, and it would result in the roommate's passing. She was describing the act as nothing more than a poke. Initially, he'd been charged in the first degree, a 26-year sentencing, but he entered a plea to one felony count of manslaughter, with the maximum sentence for such a crime being life in prison. Medina was only sentenced to 6 years for voluntary manslaughter. Not only did Joshua meet his demise at the hands of his own roommate, but justice had also not been served in the way that it should have been, according to Joshua's sister, Rachel, who was against the ruling, stating that the coroner's report found defensive wounds along her brother's hands. He supposedly fought for his life. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.